Hi, I'm Laura. I'm autistic. I love trains. I know it's a bit of a stereotype. And I am going to try and make a video today on a train using this train simulator controller. So, a little bit of background about myself to give some credentials for my love of trains. I got married to my wife on a train. I won a competition that was run by Avanti West Coast to get married on one of their Pendolino services between London Euston and Birmingham New Street. It got some news coverage. Here's some stuff from that.
So the last 18 months has been really challenging for lots of couples to be having to change or postpone their wedding plans, and Avanti West Coast just wanted to put a smile back on people's faces.
As someone that is autistic and absolutely loves trains, obsessed with trains, plays train simulators on the computer, I am very excited to get married on a train.
And I'm very excited that you're very excited.
You are now wife and wife.
I also love train simulator video games, hence owning this train controller and being the world record speedrunner in several train routes in Train Simulator Classic. I'm also a Train Simulator brand ambassador. I love train simulators. So what is this video I'm hoping to make? And I say hoping to make because at the time that I record this intro, I've not done it yet. I've wanted to do this for ages. I want to go and play Train Simulator on a real train using this controller to control a virtual train as it goes through the same stations as the real train in real time, roughly in sync with each other. And then in post, I'm gonna overlay a bunch of me info dumping facts about my love of trains to you, with some very gentle background music, probably. So, let me just get this out of the way. I don't have any kind of special permission from any of the train companies to do this, so I am working out a way to do this as unobtrusively as possible, and in as much of a I can set it up quickly, I can get in, I can do it, I can get out kind of way as I can. I keep thinking about ways that I could make this video maybe a little more technically advanced. I have a capture card that I could use to capture direct footage of the train sim gameplay, as well as playing the train simulator and having my camera feed of me using the controls and the train. I could be doing that too. Uh, I'm gonna try and keep this simple because I need to be able to set it up quickly, not have people asking me too many questions about what I'm doing, or get in the way of it too much, or complain too much about my setup, and then be able to get out quickly. Or if something goes wrong and I have to like switch trains or something, I want as little of a setup as possible. So here's the vague plan. I have the Asus ROG Ally. This is a decently powerful Windows-based gaming handheld. It can play Steam games, it can run Train Simulator Classic. I have the Raildriver. This is a Train Simulator controller. It works with Train Sim Classic as long as you have some software to make it work. So my plan is to do the Class 377 Electrostar train from Brighton Central to London Victoria. And I'm going to position myself as far back in the train as I can so that people aren't having to walk past me to get to their seats, and there's as little chance as possible of that being a problem. I'm going to try and pick a time in the middle of the day when there's no commuting happening on a weekday to minimize the busyness possible. I'm not going to record my own voice giving my train commentary during the journey because that, minimizing the amount that I'm inconveniencing other people, I can record that in post later. So my plan is at this moment is I'm gonna take a train to Brighton, and then I'm gonna get myself onto the Brighton to Victoria train. I'm gonna set myself up at the back and basically set up this with Train Simulator running. I'm gonna set up my Train Simulator controller plugged in. I'm gonna set a camera up on a tripod so that you can see me and the Train Simulator controller and the game that are happening, and hopefully at least some of this game will be like reasonably in shot. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that I'm playing the game or not. I'm going to try and have it enough of an angle that it's visible to me and to the camera, and also you'll see a little out the window. You'll see the journey heading by. That's the plan. I have not done like a test run of this, so I have no idea how visible this is going to be. Maybe I do a future one of these where I do make the extra effort to have a capture card set up so that I can cut between like the gameplay feed and the footage of me on the train. We'll work it out. This is a bit of a guerrilla operation. I'm just gonna have to give it a go and see how it goes. So hey, so I'm recording this the morning that I'm gonna go do my playing train sim on a train video, and I've done some logistics. I've finally done the logistics and worked out some specifics that I'm going to address before I start the journey. So I decided, and I'm locked into this because I'm autistic and I made a plan and I'm sticking with it, that I was going to do Brighton to Victoria is the rail line that I wanna do this little adventure with. The problem being, that route used to be the Class 377 train the whole way through. Now, that route is kind of split between Thameslink and Southern ownership, which means that the 377 the whole way through, not an option. I could do the Gatwick Express train, which that would barely stop at any stations. It would have none of my journey be on the Class 377. Doesn't feel like the way I want to do this. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be starting in Brighton on the Class 700, and I'm going to be doing that through to, I think, East Croydon, and then swapping to the Class 377 from East Croydon to Victoria. So not as much of the journey is going to be on the Class 377 as I had hoped. I do not have the Class 700 on Train Sim Classic in order to do this with, and some of the more modern train sims might allow me to do this journey more accurately, but Train Sim Classic just has quick play, which is going to make it way easier to emulate this in the way that I want to emulate it, where I am keeping in track with the real-world train, rather than having to keep to the game's schedule or potentially fail. So, yeah, I'm going to be starting on the Class 700, which is not going to match the train class that I'm on in-game. But when I get to East Croydon, I'm going to do a chaotic swap between trains. I'm going to have to close down my setup as I'm pulling into East Croydon. Set it up in a very rushed way when I get onto the train from East Croydon to Victoria. So there's going to be a little bit of downtime around Victoria in the video, but at least the last, 20 minutes, half an hour of the video will be the same class of train on the route. I have future ones of these that I want to do that can 100% be emulated. The track and route will be the same in-game as on the real train. If I have more time and more money at some point in future, I want to redo the Pendolino service from Euston to Birmingham New Street and back, which was the route that me and my wife got married on the Avanti West Coast Pendolino service. And that I can replicate one-to-one in-game, but that's a longer route that's going to be more of a faff for me to, getting to Euston to start the journey, doing that return journey, is just a bit more of a faff of a setup. I would like that to be the second video in this series if this first one does well, but yeah, that's why you're going to see me start this journey on a Class 700 and not a Class 377. This video has been a bit of a hurdle to start making anyway. I'm just gonna jump in and do it. This just means I have excuses to tell you about twice as many train routes. Also, if I happen to be dressed as though I am going to space with a jumpsuit with patches and military medals on it when I record this video, my day is maybe going to line up such that I'm doing two autistic hyperfixations at once. I may be doing this train route to go to Bridge Command, a place where I basically LARP Star Trek, where I go pretend to be in Star Trek, but it's sort of a live-action video game. I have videos about that on the channel as well. So yes, if I'm dressed not to be a train conductor, it's because I am doing this hyperfixation video on my way to go do a different hyperfixation. I'm letting 2026 is the year I'm letting the autism win. For full transparency, the gentle sounds of trains that you are hearing in the background of this video are not the real sounds from the train journey that I took, because there were people talking about, like, business meetings that got picked up by my microphone, and I don't want to ruin things for them. So, enjoy the sounds of a nice, gentle train journey that are not the train journey you're seeing in the video. Hooray for the limitations of trying to do this on a public train that other people are using, that is not, like, privately mine. Okay, so we're getting to the bit of this where I am actually playing Train Simulator on the train now, and all of what you're going to hear from me during this bit is recorded in post. I want to start by talking about the journey I took to be recording this video this morning, because it was not easy. Issue number 1, train service disruptions. Without getting too specific, the class/service provider/stopping service versus not stopping service combination of train that I had planned the video around had some service disruptions, and I had to improvise a little bit, because this was the one day I had available in my schedule to do this, and I knew that if I didn't do it today, I would just put off redoing it. So, the train network is resilient. When I talk about my love of trains, I talk about the fact that, like, they are predictable, there's very sort of, like, routine, they do exactly what they should when they should. This sort of predictability element of public transport is a thing I love about them, and that clearly didn't work on this day, but the thing I love about train networks is their resiliency. I still got to London Victoria when I was expected to, even with sort of these alteration issues. The rail network is real good at adapting itself and finding fixes, even if it meant the first, I'm going to say, 20 minutes of this journey are not a one-to-one match between what I'm doing in-game and what I'm doing, what is happening on the real train. Around 20 minutes in, when we get to Hayward's Heath, that's when we're going to start the one-to-one. What is happening in the game is what's happening on the real train, and that's the bit I'm really excited to get to, because that's when we start seeing, like, quite how one-to-one the game to the real world is, because we'll start, like, passing under bridges and through tunnels at the same time in both, and that's really cool. But for these first 20 minutes this first 20 minutes is basically me playing Train Simulator on a train, getting used to the setup, because part of the deal here is the Rogue Ally is a smaller screen than I gave it credit for. I'm used to playing it like a handheld up near my face. Having it sort of at an angle away from me so that it's visible in frame here, but also down on a table, doing things like reading the very small text at the bottom of the screen for which station is upcoming and how close I am to it, for example, very tricky to do. This made keeping an eye on my timings to try and match my route with the real train a little tricky, and we'll talk about that a bit more when we get to the section where we're sort of one-to-one doing the journey. I also turned off the game's sound effects because I didn't want to disturb other passengers, and that meant, for example, I didn't have the audio cue for the driver, the driver alertness or awareness alarm, which is the, hey, you've slightly speeded, or you've for whatever reason you gotta press a pedal in the driver's cabin, or in this case I gotta press a button on my console to go, yes, I am awake, I am alert, I'm paying attention. And if you don't respond to that alarm, the train gets put into an emergency stop and goes all the way to 0 and then back up. So I was having to rely on the visual cue of a little alert icon, a little exclamation mark on the Rogue Ally's little screen. But that's tricky because I'm also trying to look out the window at the real route and pay attention to where I'm at in game versus that, versus keeping an eye on all the people in the train and making sure I'm not inconveniencing them. So this first 20 minutes was ultimately making sure this setup worked and playing Train Simulator, but also getting used to what are the things that are going to be tricky, what are the things that, like, I would change in a future run of this, doing all the, like, logistical setup-y stuff. when we get to Hayward's Heath, because this first 20 minutes is we had to take a route that was slightly different from the route that the actual train took, because cancellations and whatnot. When we get to Hayward's Heath, it starts syncing up, and that's going to be a very different kind of bit of this video to talk through. So yeah, on my way to Brighton, so not the bit you're seeing filmed now, but when I was travelling to Brighton, I did a little bit of a test setup just to work out what I needed to get this shot looking right. I realised I needed to sit in a seat where there was going to be an unobstructed window view in front of me, sort of 45 degrees angle in front of me, just because of the angle I was going to be filming from. And I needed to have myself set up to go me and the Raildriver on the window side, the ROG ally playing the game on the aisle side. It was going to be hard to get a view of, like, the game and the view out my window without, like, looking back and forth. So I ended up getting, like, a schedule of the times the train was expected to stop at different stops and have that on my phone so that I could time myself with arrive at the next in-game station around this real-world time. I'll probably line up with the in-game version, the real-world version. This setup was, pretty easy to set up and was pretty repeatable. I got some curiosity from people, but nobody was really bothered. I think once, right toward the end, and we'll talk about it when we get there, someone nudged the tripod and knocked it over a little bit, and I had to put it back up. But other than that, for an over an hour train journey, the tripod wasn't in anyone's way. A couple of people gave some strange or curious looks over in my direction. The biggest response I got was from a ticket inspector who did not ask me to show them my ticket. I think they looked at me and went, "Yeah, you've set up such an elaborate setup here that you're not going to be running away to hide from the ticket inspector. It is unlikely you are trying to fare dodge with this much attention drawn to you and this little ability to run away." But the ticket inspector did just have a looked at me, looked at the game, and sort of worked out what was happening, looked at the train controller, and just smiled and nodded up and down slowly before walking past. So yeah, that was lovely. For future things that I was thinking about during this first 20 minutes of, like, testing and setup, and trust me, I will get to talking more specifically about trains. This is just stream of consciousness, the things I want to talk about in this, like, 20-minute setup bit of the video. There are mains plugs on a lot of the trains that I was on this day. What I probably could have done is brought mains plugs along, rather than praying and hoping that my battery life on my devices would live. I don't want to rely on that, but, like, yeah, I maybe could have benefited from doing that today. I also thought about the fact that it would be lovely if I do more of these videos to have a second camera. Maybe have someone like my wife Jane come along to take shots, like, directly videoing out the window, or some zoomed out shots of me from a bit more of a distance. Just some things to change up the perspective a little bit and to be able to vary the shots that I'm showing you. So at this point, we're about halfway through the not synced up journey, Brighton to Hayward's Heath bit of the journey. And this is, I think, a good place for me to start talking about why I chose the Brighton Central to London Victoria train route to do as a test run for this video. I have a lot of love for this train route, not necessarily based on, like, any kind of childhood nostalgia for the route specifically, but because I have a lot of love for Brighton and London and the places in between. I have some really lovely friends that live down in Brighton. Brighton is where I go to when I get tattooed. I get a lot of my tattoo work done down in Brighton. Brighton is home to a lot of events that are very important to me community-wise, things like Brighton Trans Pride. I've had some really lovely community experiences down in Brighton, and it is one of those places that just feels very inherently safe for me as a autistic and trans person to just exist in. And I've always had a lot of love for that. I grew up down by the seaside, and as someone who doesn't live near the seaside anymore, Brighton is the seaside place I visit most frequently, and I have a lot of love for there. I love its station. Its big, high-ceilinged grand station is really lovely. But it's a place that, like, anytime I pull into Brighton, it just feels like a very safe place to arrive, and that kind of gets tied in with my feelings about the train station. The other end of this line is London Victoria, and London Victoria is it is where I tend to go for, like, concerts and things. When I first started getting into the video game industry, being a video game critic, it's where I went for a lot of press events, and as such I associate it with the first times I got to go to, like, review events of video games. My favourite concerts I've ever been to have been there. Recent years, my other hyperfixation of the moment, Bridge Command, where I go and basically do Star Trek LARP, that takes place in London, not too far from Victoria. It happens near Vauxhall. And dotted at various stations between Brighton and London is where most of my friends live. I'm a very southern England person, and without getting too specific about where my friends are dotted about, they're all in the London to Brighton-ish realm. And as such, that whole stretch is just dotted with people I love, and it feels like taking a train from Brighton to London is taking a train from and to two of my favourite places, and spiritually going past the places and people I love along the way. And this is the thing that I find hard about explaining why I love trains sometimes, is a lot of my love of trains is so ephemeral. It is so connected to, this is a predictable and routine piece of public infrastructure that is connecting all of these little hubs that are emotionally important to me, and that journeying between these two places feels like it is journeying through the things and places I love. I've talked about this elsewhere before as well. I love trains as this sort of liminal space, this space where the regular rules of time and space don't really apply. It's the same reason I love airports. It's this, when I'm on a train, no one expects anything of me. I can use the excuse, oh, I didn't have good signal, I was on the train, to not feel obligated to, like, answer an email or respond to a phone call. It's, if I'm taking an hour's train journey, that's an hour in which it's expected I'll probably just watch little videos on my phone and keep myself entertained, and, like, I'm not expected to be productive. And as someone that really struggles to just relax and take time to not be doing something, trains are this liminal space where just taking a break is not only permitted but encouraged, and that is part of the magic of train journeys to me. It's, I think, the thing about trains that I missed the most during COVID, when during that first year of COVID where everyone was staying indoors religiously, and it's why I got so into Train Simulator. I was trying to recapture this just feeling of, I'm allowed to do nothing right now but just soak in enjoying this space where there is nothing to happen other than we're going to go from here to there, and until that's done, going through the scenery is all we're up to. Now, if you're watching the video, you might have noticed at this point my train came to a complete stop, not at a station in-game, and I'm currently building the speed back up. This is the first time during the playing on the train where I missed the driver alertness alarm and accidentally triggered a emergency brake. So when this happens, I'm going to go all the way down to 0 miles an hour. I've got to set my directional indicator to neutral or reverse. I'm going to set my throttle all the way down to to 0 speed, and then I've got to put us back into forward and back into accelerating and start from scratch. It's the you got to start from square one if you trip that alarm. For the most part, once we were in sync, once I was in sync with the stations, I was generally avoiding speeding in order that I could, like, staying just below the speeding threshold would put me at roughly the correct times to arrive at various stations. So the driver alertness alarm, not such a thing to be worried about. I think the only time later when once the train and the game are in sync, the only time where I trip it up is trying to, I've gotten a little ahead of the real train, I'll slow down. I slowed down a bit too much, I'll speed up again. Oh no, I tripped the alarm while trying to speed to try and catch up again. It's getting used to the don't treat this the way I do speed running the game, where I sometimes will just ignore the speed limit a little bit because speed running. It's not safe to do speeding, particularly when you can't hear the hey, do you know you're speeding alarm, to turn that off. But yeah, a little background about this video, a little more while we're still on the bit where the game and the real train aren't quite in sync. Just for reference, I paid for my own train travel. I planned this with loose approval, or at least not disapproval, from the train companies involved. I reached out to the train operators, some of them responded, some did not. Generally, the closest I got to an approval was, it won't be a problem if you do it in a way that is not obtrusive to other customers. We do not mind you doing this. Hence being a little nervous while filming it, because, like, no one had said, no, that is against the rules, you're not allowed to do it, and everyone was generally like, it shouldn't be a problem. But I'm autistic, and I'm doing a thing that might inconvenience other people a tiny bit, that I don't have, like, ironclad approval for, and that feels like breaking the rules, and therefore I was pretty nervous during this first section. That improved a lot, and I think if I did another one of these, like the Pendolino, Euston to Birmingham New Street train, I'd be a lot less nervous. If I had more explicit permission, I would love to do something more elaborate someday. Like, if I could get one of the train operating companies to think this is an interesting idea and to, like, more actively collaborate with me and their PR company about doing this, I'd love to do something like recording one of these videos sat in the, like, a spare seat in the driver's cabin, and just genuinely pretending to driving the virtual train while sat next to the person driving the real train, maybe even have a little conversation or interview them afterwards, doing something like that. That I've got plans for, in a big picture world, the kind of version of this video I would love to do. We'll see if it ever gets there. But yeah, at this point we are getting pretty close to Hayward's Heath, which is where the game and the real world train are going to start to sync up in a more satisfying way. I think this is maybe a good place for me to just talk a little bit broadly about, like, my lifetime love of trains in a broad sense, and maybe I'll circle back in a bit more depth onto some of these topics. I'm autistic, and I know that being obsessed with trains as an autistic person is a bit of a stereotype, but it's a stereotype that exists for a reason, because it's true for a lot of us. I'm not the kind of autistic person that is obsessed with, like, the schematics and the technical, mechanical functioning of trains, so much as their predictability and sort of social function, as it were. I really started to grow to love trains as a young child. I was obsessed with watching Thomas the Tank Engine growing up, and I think a lot of the appeal of that show for young autistic children is the same as the appeal of anime to a lot of autistic people. It's that very exaggerated facial expressions and a narrator that is telling you exactly what the non-verbal subtext of the interactions are. If you're someone that struggles to follow non-verbal subtext and subtle expressions, a show that really spoon-feeds that to you can be very appealing. But outside of Thomas the Tank Engine, my mum used to take me train spotting as a young child. I was very obsessed with watching trains in real life. It was one of the things that my mother would do with me at a pretty young age, like a toddler age, is we would go and stand over the bridge near my local train station and just watch the trains go by. And she'd sort of lift me up enough that I could see over the railings, and we'd watch different trains go by. And even from a young age, I remember being really fascinated by all of these trains are full of people coming from somewhere and going to somewhere. And this is like this really predictable thing that's going to take them from where they are to where they're going. And I just remember finding that really, really beautiful. The idea that just all of these things were crisscrossing and going all the way around the country and doing their own thing in this like synchronized dance that was all just taking people where they needed to be in a very orderly manner. And as the kind of child that was like, I didn't play with my toys, I lined them up neatly and efficiently in rows, and that's how I played with them. The orderly nature of real-world trains made a lot of sense to me. So, at this point, an announcement came over the tannoy to say that we were approaching Hayward's Heath, and that is where I had worked out that the game was going to be able to sync up with the real-world journey again properly. So what I did is at this point, I get the ROG ally, I cancel the current journey that I'm doing in-game, and I boot up a specific journey from Hayward's Heath to East Croydon, because that's where I'm going to be having to switch trains in order to eventually be on the Class 377, which is the class of train that I'm doing in-game. So you'll notice at this point we're pulling into the station, and as we do, I should be able to... I think I get the game up and running just in time that before we start moving out of Hayward's Heath, the game is booted up and we're in Hayward's Heath station so that we can make the journey in real time. It's loading into the map right now, as you can see, and I'm probably going to do less general chit-chat about trains from this point in the video, and I'm going to probably do a bit more taking breaks and talking about things as I see them happening in-game versus the real world. Now, I've been saying that Hayward's Heath is where the game and the real train and my gameplay get in sync with each other, and generally speaking, I think that's true. This first station, from Hayward's Heath to the next station we're going to reach, I was definitely playing Train Simulator too slow to keep up with the real train. A lesson I learned during this first stretch of gameplay was I ideally want to be playing Train Simulator at maybe 2 to 3 miles an hour slower than the speed limit for that stretch of the journey. I was definitely going a lot slower than that. I didn't get moving fast enough. I didn't bring myself... I gave myself too much headroom below the recognized speed limit. And what you'll notice is, up until this next station, we're passing a lot of the same landmarks. You'll see me go underneath bridges in-game, and then if you look out the window, you'll also see, a little earlier, you'll see the bridge, go past the window. I was definitely lagging behind. You'll notice it when we get to the next station. We will pull in almost as the real-world train is ready to depart again, and we have to sort of pull in and pull away straight away in-game to get back on track. But yeah, this first spell is really just me trying to work out, like, how do the in-game speed limits line up with the real-world speeds? How close is the real-world train driver driving to the speed limit? How fine of a margin is there? If I know what the speed limit for an area of track is, what's a good rule of thumb I should be following if I want to keep pace with the train? Because, like, I can feel and see when we are speeding up, when we're slowing down. I don't have a speedometer. I don't know what speed the train driver of the real train is going, and I don't know enough about the distance between stations and the scheduled stopping times between stations to know the average speed you need to be going to hit those point markers. So as I say, this first up to this next station is a little bit of an experiment, and I definitely fell behind, but we get closer in sync after we pull into the next stop and head onward. Now, I didn't set the in-game weather deliberately. I picked whatever its randomized default was. It did give me a very sort of grey, drizzly, foggy day in-game, which incidentally lined up pretty perfectly with the weather outside. It was not ideal weather for lugging a train simulator controller and a console and a camera setup outside to get to the station, but you know, it worked out alright once we were on the train, you know? One thing that I can't overstate how much I enjoyed during this filming process was the sense of tactility that came from I've pushed the lever on the train controller at the same time that I have felt the same sort of physical inertia from the train. I know that that's gonna sound nonsensical. If you're someone that drives a car, yeah, you press the thing that makes it go and you feel it go. As silly as that sounds, having the video game, and I'm looking at the video game and going, I'm using the game controller to move myself in game, and I'm focused on that relationship between my input and a tangible effect happening, but then feeling it around me is that's not usually a sensory feeling that I get when controlling the train in the video game, because I know that the lever I'm using doesn't correspond to the real world train, but the real world train is reinforcing what's happening in game, and that is weirdly satisfying. Yeah, as you can see, I came a little late into this station. I came to a stop, and then basically straight away came back up to moving. In a real-world scenario, I didn't really give the passengers long enough to get on and off at this station, but as you see, that first journey from Hayward's Heath to here, I was definitely a little underestimating the speeds I needed to go to keep up with my schedule. You know, you learn these things with practice, and I will admit it's been a couple of years since I last played Train Simulator. I didn't do a lot of practicing my routes before doing this sort of ride-along adventure. One thing I thought about a lot while making this video, and it wouldn't make for a good video, but it would make for a fascinating thing to do, not for content maybe, is the idea of getting a setup where I can play Train Simulator in VR using the Raildriver while on the train. I don't know in a practical sense how workable that would be, and it would be a real test of getting my timings right and feeling the inertia of the real train to know how on point or not I was. But it's an idea I thought about a lot during this. I think this in-game, we've just gone into the tunnel, and there we go, we've just gone into it in real life. So there was maybe like a 3-second discrepancy here, but this was one of the first times where I really felt, ooh, this is working. I have synced these journeys up pretty well. As I say, I left the last station a little late, so I was playing a little bit of catch-up with the bridges we went under to get here, but we should come out, I'm hoping, within about 2 or 3 seconds of each other. So we're out in the game. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4 seconds difference. It's not going to be exactly 1-to-1, but the difference is, I would put down more to the differences in my driving and the speeds that I personally controlled in-game versus the real world, rather than a lack of accuracy between the game and the real world. Just went under a bridge, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is. I'm maybe 5 seconds ahead of where I should be in game. But the fact that, like, within about a 5-second margin, you can watch me pass a feature in game and pass it in the real world. Not only have they accurately mapped out these recognizable features, but they've accurately mapped out if you are going at about the correct speed, about the in-game speed limit, a real-world train should be hitting the same landmarks as you at about the same time as you. And that kind of accuracy is the thing that synchronicity, that sort of parallelness, is what drew me to wanting to make this video. And in, like, that first 20 minutes up to Hayward's Heath where we weren't in sync at all, and then even maybe the first 5 minutes after Hayward's Heath where I'm, like, trying to get a feel for the speed I need to be driving at in-game versus the real train, I was really worried that this idea wasn't going to work. I was really worried for a little bit that... I was worried that the synchronicity between the game and the real world that I had sort of imagined and that I perceived when I played Train Simulator, I went, this feels very true to real life, that wouldn't match when I actually tried to do it in real time. You know, I worried that the idealism of the synchronicity in my head wouldn't be matched by reality. And it's at around this point in the journey, like the going under those couple of bridges, going through that first tunnel, within about 5 seconds of each other, where I got to go, oh, the thing I'm doing in the video game and the thing in the real world can line up really well, and that's very exciting. So yeah, we are pulling into the station here, and again, this is one of our first times, this is what, 3 bridges? This is, I think, the first pulling into a station that I really nail, where pulling into the station in-game and pulling into the station in the real world, again, maybe 5 to 10 seconds apart from each other, but pretty well synced up so that I can be pulling into the virtual station, pulling into the real station, and going, yes, this works, there is merit to this idea. If I get better at syncing them up, if I get better at getting my timings right in the simulator, I can make the game and the real world line up in the way that they lined up in my head, and that's I think where I started to get really excited making this video. So at this point, we've got about 20 minutes before we reach East Croydon, and this is the stretch of the journey that I would say I really got the hang of syncing the train in-game up with the real world. It's interesting what elements of the real world the Train Simulator developers focused on emulating perfectly, which bits they sort of vibe related, and which bits they didn't worry about too much at all. Because obviously, like, anything to do with the train line and the transport infrastructure is basically one for one. Outside of potentially, you know, graffiti tagging and things that it would be basically impossible to keep up to date. Overhead, bridges, tunnels, points where multiple rail lines will converge or where one will go over another. Anything that is connected to the rail infrastructure or transport infrastructure that's required for the train to do its job are basically one-to-one. Obviously, it feels like there is a degree of not wanting to tread on copyright or trademark or design infringement on real-world buildings. So what you often get is, you get a good degree of accuracy for things like, is there a housing development? Which side of the road is that housing development on? Roughly what colour are the buildings? So you'll often see, like, oh, there's a row of buildings that all those houses were built at the same time. They're all the same sort of red brick with a sort of white accented roof. You'll see a very similar aesthetic arrangement of houses show up, and they will look close enough and be positioned in roughly the right place. Sometimes you will get more distinct buildings that are a little more slight knockoff because they have to be, but they're very recognizable, the same building. You see this for things like water towers, old, rusted metal frameworks of buildings, big, iconic shaped buildings that are very, if you know this area, you'll know that building, maintain their overall approximate shape and design. Even if some of the little details have to be sort of smoothed over to not be too identical, in broad strokes, even when you're not going through tunnels, going underneath railway bridges, I was able to get a pretty good feel. Like you see here, we're passing a sort of large beige building on the left. Even if not for the tunnel I'd just gone under, and these tunnels around here, this is us pulling into, is it Gatwick Airport? Might be Gatwick Airport here. I could tell I was in roughly the right pacing. I was arriving at roughly the right time. Because I started realizing I could go, am I passing that recognizable building at roughly the same time? Slow down or speed up a little. I stopped worrying quite so much about the speed limit. Like, generally, I would watch for the speed limit and try and keep a couple of degrees below that speed limit. But then I would make micro adjustments based on, yeah, Gatwick Airport. I pulled into Gatwick Airport maybe 10 seconds before the real train did. Really not that different, ultimately. And again, as I say, a lot of it is down to the broad strokes accuracy of even things like foliage density. Areas that have a higher density of trees versus a notably lesser density of trees are pretty well reflected between the in-game models and the real world. I'm not saying, oh, I recognize that tree, I know where we are, but, ooh, there is a cluster of trees running perpendicular to the train tracks rather than parallel. That's a waypoint that I know is in roughly the right place that I can plan my journey from. So yeah, that becomes all the more important here because from Gatwick Airport, East Croydon is the next stop we're going to, and it is, I think, something like 13 minutes, so it's 10 to 15 minutes away, and I'm not really going to be passing through a lot of other stations or stopping at a lot of other stations to use as bearings. We're not going to be doing a lot of going through tunnels. This is the point where I have to really start trusting those visual landmarks as to how I'm going to get where I'm going to go. But yeah, East Croydon is it's an interesting station. I'm not a Croydon regular by any means. I've been there from time to time. It is one of those places that I mostly know as a transport hub. And ultimately, I think that's another thing I find interesting about trains. There are so many places in the UK that I could mention by name and could describe generally the aesthetic of a town, despite having not been there, because I know the town mostly as a transport hub that I, at some point in my life, have used for connecting journeys. Back when I grew up in the southwest, Southampton used to be that for me frequently. It was the connecting point when I wanted to go to London. I would usually end up changing at Southampton Central, and Southampton Central was this train station I was intimately familiar with without being all that familiar with Southampton itself. I look today at some of the, a lot of the London Transport Hub train stations feel like this to me. I know London Euston, for example, inside and out, the train station. Could I tell you much of anything that's outside of that station? Like in walking distance? No, not really, because I go to the station and I don't really interact with the community that exists around it. And again, it's part of what I think makes train stations feel like these liminal spaces. It's this... I can be in a space that has, like, this whole world around it, but the point that is the nexus for travel is the place that cements itself in my mind. That's the place that's in between places, that's possibility, that's this connecting node, is in some ways more what grabs my attention than the world around that station. It's hard to explain some of these things. It's hard to put a nebulous love for something like that into words. I think about Farringdon like that a lot. Farringdon Station, I could not tell you anything that's outside Farringdon Station, but it has such a distinct character to it. And again, when you use a station like that as a commuter hub frequently enough, you really get to know its unique little quirks and odd little aspects to it, in the kind of way that a lot of the London train stations, if you stripped away their signage, yeah, I'd pretty easily be able to tell where I'm at a lot of the overground stations, just because they have an energy, a vibe to them, you know? I talked a little about this at the start of the video, giving my little credentials for being an obsessive train fan. As I said before, if I get to make another of these videos, I'd like the next one of these I do to be about the Avanti West Coast Pendolino from Euston to Birmingham New Street. I don't want to go too much into the story here about it, because I want to save that for a future video, but I've never felt as special on a train as I did the one time getting a dedicated marriage carriage meant that, like, I had a first-class train carriage to myself and my family and friends and loved ones and wife, that we could play our own music as loud as we wanted and have this whole little party on there. As someone that loves trains, I know that there is probably no other time in my life I'm ever going to get to have a first-class train carriage directly to myself, 100% to myself. That's just not going to be an opportunity I'm going to get again in my life, and I really tried to soak it in as much as I could, because, yeah, not really a thing that's ever going to happen again. So at this point, I should probably acknowledge, I entered this tunnel in-game way too fast, and exited it way too fast, and you'll notice in a second when we come out of the tunnel properly, what I ended up doing was, okay, there we come out the tunnel. I came to a complete standstill in order to let the real world train catch up with my in-game train. And then once the real world train left the tunnel, I put the accelerator back on again. The problem is, the real world train left the tunnel at, I'm going to say 70 miles an hour, and I started having to build up to 70, which I'm going to say took probably a solid 15, 20, 30 seconds. The real world train gets a huge lead on me here, because of the fact that this is probably the biggest mistake I make. Post Hayward's Heath, this is probably the biggest mistake I make, is what I should have done is slow down to about half speed, let the two sync up, and trusted myself to recognise a landmark other than the end of the train tunnel that is, okay, we're back with each other. The train tunnel just seemed too perfect of a resynchronization point. I just didn't stop and think about the reality of getting this 12-car digital train back up to full speed. Again, some of these are things that I'm learning. Not a thing that comes up when I play Train Simulator by itself, because I'm not fussed about exactly mimicking a real-world train's journey through the world. But yeah, I really fell behind here, and I can see exactly how I would have gotten back in sync without going from being ahead to being so far behind. But what I ended up doing was just speeding the train and keeping the driver alertness alarm kept happy as best I could in an attempt to roughly reach East Croydon at the right time. I think I went through... There's some of the stations we don't stop at, like South Croydon, that I maybe travel through a little behind the real train. The real train's in darkness right now. We are 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Yeah, we were a solid like 25 seconds behind the real train, which makes sense. If it took me as long as it did to get back up to full speed, I really did lag behind. I made the problem way worse. I should have just let myself be 10 seconds ahead of whatever I was, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 seconds behind. Yeah, I really was falling behind there. But maybe I underestimated that first count of how far behind we were, but yes, it's a thing that I really need to remember. There was a lot going on during this filming, and I don't blame myself for not remembering it, not being perfect at it the first time. I really forgot to account for quite how long it takes to get this train up to speed, and that if I'm going to let the real world train catch up with me, I need to not slow down too much or for too long. A train with momentum is going to be way harder to catch up with at a certain point. Now, as we start to approach East Croydon, which we're still a few minutes away from, but I want to talk about this now before we get there, which is, I was able to set up at the start at Brighton because I got on the train maybe 5 minutes before it departed, and I had time to set up properly, unpack my things, set everything up in a reasonable pace. Both for getting off the train at East Croydon and getting onto the second train at East Croydon, I was going to have to collect all my stuff up together quickly enough to get off the train before it continued on to its next destination. And when I got onto the next train, I was going to have to set up my setup quick enough that I didn't fall too far behind the real-world train. So I am doing a lot of pre-preparation in my head at this point about... I had a suitcase with me, which is how I originally brought all this kit. I opted not to pack things back into the suitcase and to just stop filming, bundle everything up under one arm, get off the train, find some cover from the rain, get onto the next train, bundle everything down, go, go, go. This is probably the place where... That's probably the place where I got the most looks and stares during this process. If I do another of these videos, I would love to do it without a switch of train, because, yes, having a bundle full of technology, including a bunch of levers and dials, and a games console, and a tripod with a camera on it, and a suitcase, that's where I got the strange looks on this journey. But yeah, as I say, I was very lucky. This first bulk of the journey we've been on, there were very few other people around, which was nice. I picked my day and time well. There was a couple sat having a business meeting reasonably close. They came in and sat down after I was already settled, so I can't be held responsible. They saw this happening and consented regardless to come sit here. That's not on me. I didn't come intrude on them. But yeah, I was lucky to not have as many eyes on me as I expected to. If anything, it really reminded me of something that I do believe to be true, and I need to think about more often, which is most people are too absorbed in their own lives to really give a shit what anyone else is up to, you know? But yes, at this point we're just about to pull into East Croydon, so prepare to see me turn off the camera and then, in a panicked scramble, turn the camera on again, and we'll start talking about trying to get set up on the East Croydon train in real time, in a hurry, very panickedly. So here we are on the East Croydon to Victoria leg of the train, and as you might notice, there is someone sat in the row directly in front of me. They didn't seem to be bothered by the presence I was up to, and they're not so visible that I think it's going to be a problem that they're in the footage. Where I had made great efforts at Brighton to find a seat that was going to be good for filming, but also was going to be, like, deliberately not sat near any existing people. If I wanted this to have the game up and running and filming quickly after departing East Croydon, I was going to have to just sort of pick the best seat I could and go with it. Now, unfortunately, as you can probably see here, I clicked Start Game on Train Sim in Steam as I got on the train, and I did it pretty quickly. I got sat down and started that stage pretty quickly, and it did not want to load. I don't know what happened. I pressed play, and it looked like it was loading, and then it didn't load, which gave me a solid 30-40 seconds here of not having the game open yet when I should have done. So I'm very quickly setting East Croydon and Victoria as our stations. And at this point, I've been on the new train. We'll see. When we load into the level, I should be able to give you a pretty accurate count of how far behind the real train I was. So we're currently a minute and a half. And honestly, considering the amount of technical setup required to get the Raildriver and the camera and the game set up, I ideally wanted to be under a minute and a half, and we're more at the 1 minute 45, 1 minute 50. So we're about 2 minutes behind the real train with 15 minutes of journey to Victoria, so we're gonna have to make up about 2 minutes of journey. Surprisingly, I make it up by the time that we make it to Clapham Junction. So we do, I believe, reach Clapham Junction around the same time in-game as in the real world. It's not ideal. Again, you can see how I would much prefer, if I do a second one of these videos, I would like to do a route where I can plan it in advance enough that there does not need to be a change of train in the middle, because as you saw right before that we got to East Croydon, we were doing a pretty good job of reaching places pretty in sync, other than my little issue with pausing in the tunnel. This nearly 2-minute delay was a real setback to doing these routes in sync. But as you can see, a lot of the route directly, like, as you're leaving East Croydon has a pretty low speed limit. Like, you have to be, I think, below 40 miles an hour for a lot of the area where you are immediately departing East Croydon. So what I did was I simply sped at double the speed limit, and you can see me with my left thumb pressing down a button pretty regularly. That is just me tapping the driver awareness system to be like, yep, I'm aware, train, don't force me into an emergency stop because you think I've fallen asleep at the wheel. I have not fallen asleep at the wheel. I am deliberately speeding to try and catch up with myself. Now, I've got notes. Where did I catch back up on myself? Let me open my notes up. Yeah, I speeded, I speeded at about double the speed limit until, Balham, and then I deliberately slowed myself down, because I think I hit Balham a little faster. Like, by Balham, I'd already overtaken the real-world East Croydon train, so at that point, I slowed down a bit until we reach, Wandsworth Common, which I think Wandsworth Common is about where I get back in sync with the train itself. And keep an eye. So I'm still speeding right now, so we've not hit Balham. But yeah, Wandsworth Common is about where we get back in sync. There is also a point in this leg of the journey, and I can't remember exactly where it is. I'm gonna guess it's just after Wandsworth Common, perhaps, where I do get a second emergency stop. That emergency stop is 100% purely a artifact of me stopping to take notes on my phone for what I was going to talk about in this video. I wanted to make notes about where I'd been speeding to and where I slowed down to get myself back in sync, and I simply did not notice the driver awareness alarm while trying to take those notes. I arrive at Clapham, I think, slightly after the real train arrives there, but I do leave Clapham on time, so Wandsworth Common, we're on time. Having to come to an emergency halt slows us down. We do get back on track by Clapham. So I think considering how much of a chaotic mess it was trying to get onto this train and get myself caught up on a 2-minute delay with the real world train, I did a decent job of getting this last segment of the journey back on track. Also, this is the correct class of train, finally. It's the class 377, the one that I'm on in-game. This is why I've largely switched to the in-carriage view for this segment, I don't know how well you can see them on the slightly out-of-focus ROG Ally screen. The chair in front of me, the blue with the various stripes on it, is the same pattern on the chairs in the game, because I'm on the same train now. Sat on the right-hand side, window side. I'm sat roughly in the same position in the carriage, and not identical. I've not sat at a table, at like one of the 4-person table seats, just because I didn't want to take up more space than was polite. But I am about as close to the position in the carriage I could be, in the same carriage, in the same class of train, doing the same journey. And this is what I wanted to be emulating. This is like the dream that I wanted to be doing from Brighton, but you know, today was the day I had that I could actually make this video, so we make do with it. Tee-hee-hee. But yeah, we are finally, we're on the last stretch of the journey at this point. How are we doing on time? We are maybe 10 minutes from Victoria, and I'm always surprised when I get the train into London, how recognisable the different stretches of, like, I would best describe them as, like, the outer rings of London that you pass through on the way into central London. for a place that is so often talked about as if it is very uniform and bland and that there's not that much going on with it, London has a lot of really unique architectural and themed areas that you go through. Here's the driver alertness alarm. You can see that little yellow exclamation mark on screen. And I failed to respond to it, and my speed is dropping, and I hit the button. It's too late. So yeah, this is what causes me to arrive slightly late to Clapham Junction. You can see the speed indicator in the top left of the Raildriver. I gotta wait until it hits 0. Yeah. And then we can start accelerating again. It's not the biggest delay, but it's just enough that we just about gotten back on track. I accidentally tripped the driver awareness alarm and had to go into that emergency stop because I was making notes on my phone rather than paying attention to the driving route on the game. And then I instantly get the phone back out, the thing that caused me to have that delay. Granted, I'm barely at 40 miles an hour on a slow accelerate. Like, it's not like there's going to be any problems in this moment, but it does amuse me looking at the fact that I so quickly got back to my phone. I will also apologise, my camera died right as we're getting into Victoria, so at the end of this journey, you won't see me come to a 100% complete stop directly at the end of the platform. I will be at a nearly complete stop. Oh yeah, here we are, Clapham Junction. We'll be at a nearly complete stop, nearly at the end of the platform when the camera died. I had a spare battery I could have swapped in a worst case scenario, but it was pretty much perfect, the amount of battery life I had on that camera and the length that this journey was. I also think it's around here that the one time the camera gets nudged happens. Yep, there it goes. I did my best to... I had the tripod positioned basically so it didn't stick out at all, or only one of the legs stuck out like maybe an inch or so into the aisle. As much of it as possible was within the my own two-seat space. And the fact that that's the first time someone slightly nudged it, I hope means that I was as I was as little inconvenience as possible with my setup position. As I say, maybe what I should have done and what I would do in hindsight is have the camera at a lower position and angled up a little more so that we could get a little more view out the window next time. A lot of the setup here was experimentation. It was me working out what do I like, what do I not, what works if I'm going to try and... if I want to take this as a proof of concept to make more videos from. So yeah, here we go. Last section of the journey. Clapham Junction to Victoria. I don't think there's any delays or any issues on this now. It's just smooth sailing as we get into London proper, as it were. We've got maybe 5 minutes of journey left. If I were going to Bridge Command, which is where I end up going after I finish filming this video, I would usually swap at Clapham Junction and go to Vauxhall, but I may end up doing a little triangle here today. I go to Victoria to finish the train route, and then get the tube just a couple of minutes backward to Vauxhall. Which is why I ended up doing the Bridge Command, wearing my Bridge Command outfit and going along. I was like, if I'm gonna do this out of the office journey, it's gonna drop me off right near the place where I pretend to be a space captain. It'll be like a 3-minute journey. Yeah, why not? Because I'd done a lot of... it was a lot of... doing this on the train was a lot of keeping hyper-vigilant about how other people were perceiving me, and if anyone was going to be a problem that I had to keep an eye out for or be aware of. And I was like, I deserve a little... This was lovely from an autistic perspective, but it was also... I was being very publicly, visibly autistic and had to be very aware of that and have my alert up. My reasoning was, well, now that this is done, I've done autism for work, and now I deserve some autism for relaxation. I deserve to go to a place where I will be doing an equally autistic activity, but with a bunch of other people who, let's face it, a good percentage of whom are also autistic. They ain't judging. But yeah, we're going past. You can see some of the buildings we're passing mimic some of the ones in game around here. This very distinctive style of the rectangular glass buildings, and then the brown ones that we've just passed. We are just about to go over the river. Yeah, so we're in the real world. We're crossing the river now, and you can see us in game crossing the river. Again, we got really well in sync toward the end here. This stretch of central London is one of the places where you can best see. We can't legally have one-to-one the exact same building necessarily, but the vibes of the buildings are very, very, very similar. If this train stops passing, you can see the stretch of houses on the out the window is very similar to the stretch of houses we're passing in game. This sort of big, slightly yellow, terraced, grey roof, chimneys coming out the top. We're starting to head down as we go. Oh, did I might have tripped the emergency stop one more time. If I did this again, one other thing I might do is put a headphone in from the ROG Ally so that I can... It's one extra bit of tech. But if I could have headphones on and hear the game, I could hear the driver alertness alarm, and that wouldn't be an issue. Again, if I was playing this on a bigger screen, the driver alertness alarm would be a much less prominent issue, but it was just hard to see with the game not in an ideal position and not at an ideal size. But here we go. We start pulling into Victoria, and I'm going to start wrapping up this video. Thank you so much for checking this video out. This an hour and 15-minute autistic info dump where I play a train video game while on a real train. If you like this, there's also a version that will be uploaded that is just commentary-less that you can put on in the background. Please share it, watch it, subscribe if you enjoyed it, post a comment. I would love to do more of these. I need to know that it is financially and views-wise reasonable for me to do so, but I would really love to make this a regular thing where I post just an hour plus of me talking about trains while on a train, and a commentary-less version of that, just posting train sim on trains content. Thank you for watching. Bye.